My boyfriend asked for a paternity test of our child. As soon as the results come and show that he's the father, I'm leaving him. I'm a new mom to a baby boy who is my pride and joy, and though it's been a roller coaster adjusting to taking care of a baby, the past few months had been great, tiring but great. I have a boyfriend of 3 years who is the first person relationship-wise I have ever loved, and I thought we were doing great as new parents, but also as partners. Friday, he came home and asked me for a paternity test. Just like that. It was completely out of the blue. I was putting away the dishes and he asked for one, like he was asking what was for dinner. I'm a different race from him, but our child, apart from the skin tone, is literally his mirror image from pictures I had seen of him when he was a baby. I was stunned when he asked, and his reasons were that he had to be sure he was the father. He had to have that certainty. All I remember as he was speaking is just immediately feeling pain. The man I love doesn't trust me. He would actually believe that I would sleep with someone else, cheat on him, and then try to pass up another man's baby as his. I have never ever given him reason to think I would cheat on him. I have tried to be transparent and communicated, and it wasn't enough. He told me he would give me time to think about this, that he wouldn't go behind my back and do this test, but for our relationship to move forward, he needs to be 100% sure. He repeated this because he, in his words, needed me to realize how serious he was. After thinking for a couple of days, I'm going to allow him this paternity test because I have nothing to hide. I never cheated and would never cheat on him. Once it's proven that he's the father, I'm ending it, leaving the same day, and I'm going to try my best to be a cooperative co-parent with him. In the meantime, I'm coming up with my exit plan, a place to live, and a lawyer to work out a custody arrangement in court. I couldn't tell my father or my friends right now because they would go nuclear, and my first priority is our child. I hope the test was worth it to him. I'm not asking for advice or reassurance or to explain his side. I'm just realizing this part of my life is now over. What a way to start the year, huh? Am I wrong for leaving my sister's wedding early because she kept my husband out of the pictures? My 31 male, sister, and 34 female got married on Saturday. My husband of 7 years, Mark, 32 male, was there with me, and up until one point, it was an amazing event. After the ceremony, Anne wanted a picture with all of our siblings, there's 5 of us, and their respective partners, so we started lining up. When Anne saw that my husband was standing next to me, she shook her head and said something about him ruining the aesthetic. Apparently, her plan was to put one man and one woman next to each other alternately. My youngest sister, 18 female, who doesn't have a partner and was standing on the very side, offered to stand between the two of us so we could be close and Anne's wish would still be respected. I thought that was a great solution, but Anne disagreed and told Mark to get out of the picture. He's quite introverted and tries to avoid confrontation under all circumstances, so he simply complied and told me not to get angry. But it was obvious that he was hurt and disappointed by being left out. Obviously, it didn't stop me from getting angry and I walked away with him. I can understand that my sister wanted her wedding pictures to look exactly how she imagined them, but I think that the idea my younger sister proposed was very reasonable. I congratulated Anne and her husband one last time, but then I said my goodbyes. When I was asked why we were leaving early, especially before taking the pictures, I said that I didn't feel like our presence was wanted. We left before dinner was served, and I took Mark out to his favorite restaurant to cheer him up a little. Anne has texted me since, saying I was being overdramatic and making a fuss over nothing. Our parents have tried to remain neutral, but except for my youngest sister, the rest of the family supports Anne and thinks that leaving early was going too far and that I should have sucked it up instead of ruining her big day. So, am I the asshole? My brother got my daughter to open up through Mario Kart. My 32 female, brother 26 male was discharged from the Navy 2 weeks ago, and my family threw a party to welcome him home. He is an extremely outgoing person and can make anyone smile and laugh. Because he was stationed on 2 aircraft carriers for basically 8 years, he has only met my daughter a handful of times. My daughter, 12 female, is the quietest and shyest person you will ever meet. Her father severely abused her as a child, and she has extreme trust issues as a result. She only talks to me, her aunt, grandparents, and her best friend. I put her in therapy and she has been making progress, but if you touch her in any way, she might have a panic attack. Her social skills are fine, but you need to get her to trust you before she feels comfortable around you. I got her a Nintendo Switch for Christmas and she loves it. She's on it 24/7 and she considers it a safe space for her. She does her homework early so she has time to play it and takes it everywhere. She became a little too addicted to the Switch and I had to set some ground rules, but she abides by them and we managed to figure out a healthy amount of time for her to play her games. She recently got into Mario Kart and is currently finding out about all of the games in the franchise. My brother has a Wii and gave it to her, and she reset the Mario Kart Wii game so she could unlock all of the tracks and characters herself. My brother was a huge Mario Kart fan as a kid. He had every game of the franchise and competed in online tournaments before he went into the Navy. There's online tournaments of Mario Kart? Whoa, I would destroy. I don't know much about the game, but I remember him maxing out on his account at 9,999 CC, which I think is the highest level you can go. During the party, my daughter was sitting next to my sister like usual when she told him her uncle is really into Mario Kart. I walked over and said she should ask him to play after the party, but she shook her head. I pulled her aside and said my brother would not hurt a fly, and he is one of the most nicest people in the world. She agreed after I said I would be in the same room with them, and after the party ended, I asked my brother to play with my daughter, and he said yes. She got her Switch, and we sat at the table, and 20 minutes later, she was laughing and talking like I never saw her before. My brother was trash-talking her, and she was giving it back to him. They played for an hour before we left, and my daughter was sad to see him leave. She told me he's a lot of fun and wants to get to know him more. Since that day, my daughter and brother have been spending a lot of time together, and her personality has started to develop. She is talking more and is interacting with her classmates. Her English teacher emailed me to say my daughter volunteered to read a paragraph of the book they are reading, and she barely stuttered while reading. She wants to try volleyball again in the fall and asked me to sign her up for tryouts. Yesterday, she came home and said she played Mario Kart with a couple of her friends during recess, and she asked them herself. She never reaches out to people, so I was surprised. My brother has picked her up from school while I was at work a couple of times, and she finished her homework by the time I picked her up. I used to beg her to do her homework, and now she willingly does it. She is breaking out of her shell, and it makes me so happy to see. My brother has been a big part of it. He makes her do her homework, then checks it and sees if it's correct, then they play Mario Kart, or they play cards, or he teaches her how to throw a ball. I am a little ashamed to say this, but I kind of hope my brother builds a connection with her and she sees him as a positive male role model in her life. She certainly is not going to receive that from her father. Having my brother back home is awesome, but seeing my daughter and her uncle connect warms my heart.
Am I wrong for losing my passport to avoid babysitting on my vacation? I, female 17, still live at home, and my sister, 28 female, is married and has 2 kids, 5 and 3. The thing is, whenever she comes over to visit, my parents and her stick me with the kids. This wouldn't be a problem, except she doesn't visit for just an evening. She'll come for a week, and for that week, I'm an unpaid nanny. If we go out to a restaurant, I have to entertain them because my mom needs to talk to my sister and my brother-in-law. You get the picture. Well, my parents decided that since it was my last summer before I become an adult, we go to Disneyland. You know, to celebrate my graduation, but when I asked who was going, they said it was 3 of us. But when we arrived at the airport, my sister and her family were there, and guess where they were going? Strangely enough, Disneyland. I went into my backpack and grabbed my passport and I put it in my sock. And at security, I couldn't find it. Am I wrong for losing my passport to avoid babysitting on my vacation? It was supposed to be me and my parents, but when we got to the airport, my sister and her family were there, and strangely enough, they were going to Disneyland. I went into my backpack and grabbed my passport and I put it in my sock. But when we got to international security, I couldn't find it and we looked everywhere. So I had to Uber home and I missed my flight. Oh well, I get to stay home by myself for a week of peace and quiet. But my parents were mad at me for losing my passport and the money they spent on my flight and entrance. And now my mom and sister are both posting how hard it is to be at Disneyland with 2 little ones. Also that I ruined the vacation by being so thoughtless. But my dad says he knows why I did it and he understands, but also says I should have let him know so he didn't waste money. I do feel bad about wasting the money, but I've been to Disneyland before and I will go again later by myself or with my friends. Am I wrong for telling my niece about her dad's nipple piercing? So I, male 46, have a brother 47 and he has a daughter 17. My brother and I had a rough childhood and were pretty wild in our teens and early 20s. We did some stuff that most people wouldn't want their kids to know about, which is super understandable. Well, last night I was over at my brother's and my niece was visibly upset, so I asked what was up. Well, come to find out, my niece ended up getting her nose pierced without telling either my brother or sister-in-law. While her mom wasn't mad, my brother definitely was. Where we live, you can get most piercings without parental consent at 16, and it was just a simple nose piercing, just a little stud, barely noticeable. And mind you, my niece is a very good kid, gets amazing grades, is kind and very respectful. And honestly, this is probably the most bad thing she's ever done. Here's where I might have been wrong. Am I wrong for telling my niece about her dad's nipple piercing? My niece is a very good kid, gets amazing grades, and is kind and respectful, and honestly, it's probably the worst thing she's ever done. Well, like I said, my brother is mad about the nose piercing, saying he doesn't want to see that on her face. And my niece was trying to argue that it's not permanent, so he shouldn't care, and she could always take it out in the future. Basically, it's not a forever thing. Well, I obviously wasn't thinking and said, you don't really have room to talk considering you had your nipples pierced. My niece's mouth dropped to the floor and she said that makes him a hypocrite. Now my brother is saying I'm the biggest jerk for outing him to his daughter, saying something he didn't want her to know. I honestly wasn't thinking and just said it because that's what literally came to mind. Now my brother isn't talking to me. Am I wrong? Top comment says his reaction seems overblown in my opinion. Overall, I'd say you're not wrong. And a reply says I'm extremely wary of fathers or father figures who obsessively want to control their daughters.
Am I in the wrong for telling my girlfriend that her home decor is the reason I won't host a work gathering at her place? I, 32, have been with my girlfriend, 29, for over a year now. She's smart, funny, a bit quirky, and has a serious job with a good salary. We have a great time together and generally get along well. The only thing is, her choice in home decor is bizarre, and not something that you think a normal grown adult would be into. Her apartment is definitely a reflection of herself and her interests. Not in the best way though. My girlfriend has a wall dedicated to animation in one room of her apartment, like Futurama pieces and etchings and some weird triangle guy. Then there's a wall of framed preserved insects in another room, but not insects like butterflies or moths. Instead, she displays tarantulas, beetles, and large sticky insects. Her bathroom has a subtle theme of ocean, pretty common, but instead of starfish or shells, she has a little anglerfish nightlight, a small vampiric squid painting, and then a framed diagram of what apparently is a goblin shark right by the toilet. I would say a majority of her home decor and furnishings are okay. The apartment itself is very modern and sleek. It's just the random decor and juvenile-ish themes like cartoons, insects, and bizarre ocean creatures is off-putting. This is where I might be the a-hole. I avoided bringing people over to her place, especially people from my job, because of how juvenile it looks. Everyone's impressed when they see the high-rise, but that quickly fades once you enter. The one time I brought a work colleague over, they ended up telling me after that they found her insect wall terrifying. I work in finance and appearances and first impressions are important. My office will hold casual gatherings where we get together for a few drinks, get food, and we rotate hosts. And this time, it's my turn. The problem is my place is under some construction and not an ideal place to be right now, so I've been staying with my girlfriend. My girlfriend suggested that we host my colleagues here since she has a space and thinks it'll be fun. I told her that I plan on skipping my rotation and seeing if the next person would be okay with hosting early. She kept pressing on why I didn't want them over here, so I finally said it's because her home decor is strange and not something a grown woman should have, and also that her insect wall horrified one of the colleagues that did come over. My girlfriend got mad and said at the end of the day, it's not my space and these things bring her joy. She also said that she is indeed an adult woman, which is exactly why her apartment is decorated in such a manner. I love my girlfriend, I do, and it's okay to have different interests, but does an adult really need to decorate them with size a few things here and there? I mean, my own mother asked if my girlfriend was autistic after she saw the entire apartment for the first time. So, am I in the wrong?
This guy scammed me, so I ruined his life. Story time. So I used to be a private investigator, and about 3 years ago, I was hired to do a personal contract. The client was a super rich, sleazy snob, so we'll call him Steve. He hired my unit because he believed that his wife was cheating on him. And he was doing this so he could start the divorce process with some solid evidence. So he hired us for a 6-month contract, and he was to pay X amount at completion of the contract. So we set up surveillance all over their house and in the wife's car as well. And we had at least one member of the team watching her at all times. Day and night, we were watching their lives. So as time goes on, we're watching her and we very quickly realised that this woman is actually such a saint. For example, she volunteered at a soup kitchen. She also did some work at a children's hospital. One night, she even went out with one of the churches and did a canned food drive. And she did so many more, they're just the ones that I can remember. She was literally the definition of what a good human should be. On the other hand, the husband was a total arsehole. In fact, he was the one we caught bringing women home. And it was bad. It was sometimes like 2 or 3 a day. And that was only the stuff we managed to get from the surveillance in the house. So we arrived at the 4-month mark of the contract. This is basically where we show the client what we found and a bit of a report. So my agency go into this meeting with like 6 hours worth of video and audio reports. We then go to debrief and we basically say, look, we didn't find anything on her, maybe just 2 little parking tickets and then a speeding fine. But other than that, she'd done absolutely nothing wrong. And after we concluded the debrief, he looked stupefied. And he turns to us and says, so you didn't catch her cheating? What the hell was the point of me hiring you then? Like, weird flex, bro, but okay. So my boss, which is our captain, turns to him with what I can only describe as the most badass stare. You asked us to follow your wife and now you're mad that your wife is a faithful woman. And Steve became visibly annoyed by this statement. And he stands up and starts getting his jacket ready to leave. And we were like, look, there's still 2 months left of the contract, so we'll keep tailing her and see what we can find. And that was when our friend Steve turns around and says, don't bother, this is over. He says, you can come and pick your equipment up when she's not in the house and get out. So a week later, we went and did just that and we went to go get our stuff. So with our contract, you pay a small amount at the start as a commission fee and then you get the rest at the end of the contract. In Steve's case, that's 6 months, so let's fast forward to the payday after the contract finished. So my group gets a call from the office to come in on the next payday because there is an emergency. And it's regarding us and guess who? Everyone's favourite client, Steve! So we get there and find out that Steve had refused to pay and pulled all funding. So yeah, we were still going to get paid, but we wouldn't get that completion bonus. Naturally, we all left super angry. So we went for lunch and we brainstormed on how we could get even with our best pal Steve. And that was when we remembered that we had the footage of sneaky little slithery snake Steve doing the deed with those other women from his house. So the first thought was blackmail, but that was low and we were better than that. That was when we remembered Steve's wife. So I set a date so that we could sit down with her and explain everything that had happened. So I ended up showing the wife the videos. And, you know, unsurprisingly, she cried for a solid half hour. I think we must have broken her whole world and it was absolutely gut-wrenching to watch. We gave her a copy of all the evidence and a good lawyer, and we encouraged her to reach out to them. Fast forward another 6 months, I'm beep boop called into court because my company is suing him for fraud, breaking a contract and not paying his fees. Unsurprisingly, we won the case because his lawyer's argument was that we didn't deliver the result he was wanting. Obviously, we're not there to deliver a product, we're there to just observe and record what happens. Anyway, the wife ended up contacting me eventually. She did actually go through with the divorce and she basically got everything because of all the evidence. She got the house, all of the cars and a huge payout from him. We actually bumped into each other in a mall about 6 months ago and we caught up over coffee. Anyway, the tea now is that we're now dating. It's so comforting knowing you've got someone there that you can trust.